You're listening to the Very Refreshing Podcast with Dylan Hamar and Alek Jetzel. It's delicious. It's very refreshing.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Very Refreshing Podcast. I'm Dylan Hamar.
And I'm Alek Jetzel.
And it's nice to see you again. Or it's nice for you to hear us again. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we said in the first episode that we hang out a lot, so it's not like it's been a week since we've seen each other.
Yeah. It's been a while. Yeah, okay. So we obviously we spoke in a previous episode about the fact that we based our podcast name on a Seinfeld reference, in particular the Junior Mint episode. So it's not a surprise to anyone that you and I are humongous Seinfeld fans.
Oh, yeah.
It goes outside of just watching the show. We've done Seinfeld trivia. We've given each other Seinfeld related gifts. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And, I just want to start with a story about you. Okay. Now, also I think it was the very first episode, we talked about sort of how we met and stuff like that. And prior to you and I knowing each other, I would walk by your desk occasionally, and you had a pushable button on your desk. And when it was hit, it would be Frank Stiller. Serenity now!
Frank Costanza, Jerry Stiller.
Jerry Stiller.
Yeah.
Gosh, embarrassing.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a button. You'd press it. Serenity now! Yep.
And I wasn't sure if that made you a fan or if it was there just because you thought the sound was funny. I wasn't quite sure yet. So clearly you were a Seinfeld fan before you and I started hanging out. We didn't really influence each other in that way.
And it's a little bit of both. It's funny that you say that because I forgot about that. So that was kind of like a gag gift that I got in my stocking from my dad. And it's because both of my parents were big Seinfeld fans, right?
Both of them,
right? That was the show that was on like late at night that you could watch 3 or 4 episodes, even before like cable or anything. It was the show on network TV that you could stay up late and watch 6 episodes of in a row. Right. And so that my parents, they used to put the kids to bed and then stay up watching Seinfeld together. And so I've kind of like adopted into the Seinfeld fandom, right? And so because my dad loves Seinfeld and because I've learned to love it and I do love it, that was like a gift. So that's funny. I totally forgot about that I had that button.
You had that button.
Yeah.
Okay. You were influenced by your parents' interests. A lot like me with my brother. Growing up, my brother watched a lot of sitcoms, right?
Yeah.
And he got me into more than just Seinfeld. He got me into Taxi, Cheers, and even some of the really, really, like the platinum age of comedies. My brother got me into the Three Stooges. My brother got me into Abbott and Costello. So I'm very much relate to you in that way. It's sort of like the people that you idolize the most. You adopt a lot of, it's very special.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
So Seinfeld is the show about nothing. It was on at a time that sitcoms were popular, but they weren't as popular as Seinfeld. Seinfeld sort of took the world by storm. Yeah. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it introduced a very, I don't know, I think in concept, and the show makes fun of this, the concept itself on paper would not be a successful sitcom, right? But when bringing it to the masses, people loved it. Yeah. And I want to know what you think. I want to know, why do you think it was that Seinfeld caught on, and why is it so memorable even today? It's almost timeless.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. This is something I had never thought of, but there's also a running gag, especially when Jerry and George are putting together their pilot. They always get the feedback, I can't watch that crap on TV, right? So there's like this running gag that these sitcoms are garbage and they're just feeding the garbage, right? And I wonder if that has something to do with it too. It's like, I wasn't an adult back then, so it's hard for me to gauge this, but Seinfeld has this like kind of meta comedy to it where it's making fun of itself the entire time. And I wonder if that was like a new flavor that people hadn't really experienced before, right? It was almost like self-deprecating and, like I said, meta, poking fun at itself. And that was like a new thing that people hadn't really experienced before.
1000%. It was very self-referential. You know, you mentioned Jerry and George's pilot that they were writing called Jerry on the show.
Yeah.
And it followed the same exact formula. It's a show about nothing. Now, there was an underlying premise. A man has to become Jerry's butler because of an automobile incident, and the guy doesn't have money to pay for the insurance costs. But it is very self-referential. Larry David definitely shared a lot of his personal life experiences. And the reason that I love Seinfeld so much is because a lot like stand-up comedy, and why stand-up comedy is so popular and why people relate to it so much, is because these individuals are saying things that us people don't have the guts to say or mention to one another. Yeah. Right? Those toxic, those dark, those almost like bad person thoughts that we have that we keep to ourselves because we live in a society.
Yeah.
We don't talk about those things, but Seinfeld goes full pedal to the ground and it just talks about them, and they're literally bad human beings. And we'll get into, the end of the show later on. But yeah, so Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld, they casted Jason Alexander as George Costanza. In my opinion, one of the best characters in any show or movie. Genius. And of course, Jason Alexander let everyone know that he based a lot of George off of Larry.
Yeah.
And when you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, it's almost like you're watching George, the TV show.
Yeah, George.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
George. So, and then you had Michael Richards as Kramer, you had Dreyfus as Elaine, and you had just a plethora of amazing side characters. Which brings me to a question. I want to know, you and I have had this conversation, but I would love for you to share with everybody else. You are very much a you love those, you call them deep cuts.
Yeah.
You love the references that are so obscure and weird. You love the characters that maybe people overlook or don't remember as much. When it comes to Seinfeld, you personally, what are some of the characters, the lines, the scenarios that just stick out to you the most?
Favorite side characters. There's one that jumps straight to my mind, and I'm going to save him because we're going to talk about favorite episodes in a second, and he's like the central character of this episode that I want to talk about. But aside from him, one of my favorite side characters is Crazy Joe Davola. and I almost feel bad calling him Joe Davola because I feel like Crazy Joe Davola is like a very 90s thing to say, and it's almost like kind of a bummer to call him crazy. But Crazy Joe Davola also is one of those characters that sticks around for more than just a couple of episodes, right? Because most side characters, it's like a one and done deal, right? And then maybe they'll come back in a couple of seasons, like the restaurant guy.
Poppy?
No, not Poppy does come back too.
Yeah, Poppy has multiple episodes.
The Pakistani guy. I'm
yeah.
spacing his name.
Is it Babu?
Babu, there you go. Babu Bot. So Babu Bot comes back, but Crazy Joe Davola has like a 5-episode string.
He has an arc.
He has an arc, right?
Yeah.
Where he's also a guy who's writing a pilot, apparently. And then Jerry spills the beans on Kramer's party, and we get that first glimpse of him where he puts his head, he puts his hand to his head and like starts to phase out a little bit. And then he comes back a couple episodes later. He's karate kicked Kramer in the head with the helmet on, right? And then he just completely goes off the deep end into
thinking that Jerry sabotaged his show.
Yep.
And he starts dating Elaine.
And he's got the collage of Elaine photos on his wall. He takes the full plunge into madness. Yeah. And it culminates with him dressing up as, I'm going to say it wrong, Pagliacci the sad clown.
Yeah.
It's not Pagliacci. I can't remember how to pronounce it right. but hopefully everybody knows what I'm talking about. And he says to, Elaine, "Are you being unfaithful to me, Netta?" Right? I think but the fact that he sticks around for so long and has such a stretch of episodes where he's a central character is a testament to how great of a character that is.
Without going further into favorites, I just want to say one of my favorite lines is from the opera itself. And it's when Joe Davola is dressed as the clown, and he meets Kramer in the alley, and he goes, did you ever go to the circus? And Kramer goes, no, I was always afraid of the clowns. And then Joe Davola goes, are you still afraid of clowns? And Kramer goes, yeah.
Yeah, dude. And I completely forgot about this. There's a part where he's dressed up as a clown and he whoops the crap out of like 6 dudes in the park who are bothering him
with full-on martial arts.
Yeah. So not only is he, because that's the thing, they're afraid he's going to put the kibosh on them. And you're like, how dangerous could Joe Davola really be?
Oh, he's dangerous.
And then you see him really go full karate on these guys in the park, and you're like, we should have been afraid of him the whole time. Yeah. It's so wild. He's definitely one of my favorite side characters. And like I said, when we talk about episodes in a second, I'll tell you who my other favorite is. What about you? Who's one of the first people that pops into your brain when it comes to favorite side characters?
So I would probably, I don't know why, but coming to mind, it's probably Uncle Enzo.
Okay.
The barbershop owner.
Dude,
and we're going to get into that episode,
We've laughed about this all the time. I love Uncle Enzo.
Uncle Enzo is so funny. He's so funny. The
Uncle Enzo, for clarification, the barber, right?
Jerry's barber,
Uncle Enzo.
And Uncle Enzo gives him a 10-year-old's haircut. And he starts going to see Enzo's nephew. And then there's this whole like scandalous affair happening, and it's really funny. And we could talk about that in favorite episodes.
Okay.
Because I'm sure that might make your list, right?
It probably is, for sure.
Because it's in my list.
Yeah.
But in terms of characters, that's a tough one. So Uncle Enzo for sure. So I would say later on Poppy. You know, when Poppy pees on Jerry's couch.
Okay.
Poppy peed on my couch?
Okay, let's pause for a second.
Okay.
Give me your best. What's the deal? I want to hear your best impersonation real quick.
Well, I commonly do this thing because Alek is actually the only person I've ever met in my life who likes a B movie.
Oh, yeah. The B movie.
The B movie.
Love that movie.
And
by DreamWorks, where
yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld is Barry the Bee.
I'm a bee. I don't want to be a bee.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But oh my gosh, it's endless. I would have to also say the crazy old lady that lives in Kramer's LA apartment complex, the one who references the Three Stooges episode. Yeah. She's hilarious. I love the detective in that episode that's investigating Kramer for the murder as well.
Oh yeah, the super serious
He's
one.
just over the top,
yeah.
like this like quintessential like stereotypical detective that is just chewing bubble gum and wearing sunglasses and has a quip.
She was really pretty. Yeah, she was.
She was. It's just, oh my gosh, it just goes.
When you said detective, I thought you were going to say Detective Bookman, who I think has to be talked about. Detective Bookman.
So good.
And
actually, you know what? I think Detective Bookman might make top 5. And it's not necessarily because of how genius he is in the show, but I just love Jerry's responses to him.
Yeah.
Jerry knows how crazy it is. But yeah, oh my God.
That also seems like one of those scenes where, so I've said this might be a hot take. Among the 4 main actors, Jerry is
the worst.
The worst.
Yes.
Right? And which is okay because he's still good, right? And he's still it's Seinfeld, right? But he's the guy. There are certain moments where other characters are acting wild and he just like smiles through it, which is like not what his character would do. I think it's really Jerry Seinfeld not being able to keep a straight face and being like the least professional, at least for an actor amongst them. And so when Detective Bookman is grilling him, I feel like we get into that territory where they had to do that. And I can see the actor who plays Bookman just being like, come on, Jerry, get it together. Like, we need to get through this. And Jerry cannot. And that's part of the reason why that's his reaction in the scene, is him getting cut off and like just smiling through it, basically. But yeah, Bookman is incredible. That whole monologue in Jerry's apartment is one of the best there is. I just had another side character jump into my head.
There's millions.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if I could name a side character I don't like. even down to the most like non-important, like Ralph Lauren on that show is hilarious, or Calvin Klein.
Calvin Klein. Yep.
Calvin Klein is hilarious on that. Like it's endless.
Yep.
Like Jay is hilarious. Like you get into everything, and then you get into what's the lawyer's name? Lionel.
No, Jackie.
Yeah, but yeah, Kramer's lawyer, hilarious. He's always up to a ruse, like a little scheme. They're always scheming. And let's get into this. This is probably the most important thing because I don't know. I love hearing about this. And for the record, you and I went to a Seinfeld trivia night, and in my personal opinion, we wrecked shop.
Yeah.
We did really well. There was a lot of people that were older than us, and we're not that young. You know, I'm almost 32. Alec just had his birthday on Wednesday, and I'll put a little sound effect there. Or something. But
just re-record yourself going,
or I'll just use that.
Yeah. I don't want like a clip art sound. I want what you just did over the top of it.
Well, then I'm not cutting this.
Okay, perfect.
So we're definitely like in the age range where the 90s sitcom era had a huge impact on us, but the show start to finish and even getting into the finale, it's all great. However, what are some of your favorite episodes of Seinfeld?
My favorite. Before we talk about that, I want to backtrack to the trivia part, if that's okay.
Let's go.
Because there was something that happened at the trivia night that made me just like, I just grin, right? And so I mentioned that both my mom and my dad love Seinfeld. Now, I don't know if you remember, there were
the model.
Yep, there were two questions that for some reason, not for some reason, one of them was a real deep cut, right? But there was two questions that hung us up that we were having a hard time remembering in the moment when we were at this trivia night.
Who was the model that Kramer dated?
Yep, it was who was the model that Kramer dated, and it was who did Kramer pitch his cologne to, right? Now, Calvin Klein should have come to our brains right away, but the model one is a serious deep cut, right? So a couple of days after trivia night, I went and was visiting with my parents and my family, and I was telling them about the Seinfeld trivia night, right? And my parents are like, are there any questions that hung you up? Like what, you know? And I said, well, we had a hard time remembering which company Kramer sold his cologne to or tried to sell his cologne to. And without skipping a beat, my dad goes, oh, that was Calvin Klein.
I think we might have said Ralph Lauren.
I think we did.
Yeah, which is honest mistake.
Yeah. So my dad goes, Calvin Klein. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And then I was like, and then there's another one that we were Googling and we still couldn't find, right? We like legit had to go into Netflix and find the episode to figure out what it was.
The cast was.
Yeah. So, and I go, and then there's an episode where Kramer goes on a vacation and he ends up meeting a supermodel. And without us skipping a beat, my mom goes, oh, that was Elle McPherson. And I was like, how in the world did you? And I was like, dang it, we should have brought my parents to trivia night with me.
That would have been amazing. Because this was before I kind of got close to your dad.
Yeah.
And I occasionally go to your dad's house.
Uh-huh.
Dude, your dad is the coolest. like having your parents at trivia would have been, it would have been
so funny.
It would have been crazy.
It would have been so funny. Yeah. So yeah, which is so funny because, well, my parents love Seinfeld. My dad is into, fashion a little bit. He knows a lot about that industry. And then my mom was like the most amazing, like, tabloid bloodhound for the 90s, right?
Yeah.
So when I said supermodel and Seinfeld, she went, oh, it was Elle McPherson. She knew like right away who it was. So it's like, it's the perfect mesh of like loving Seinfeld, but then also having your own background information to like get the context for the question. So maybe if we ever do a Seinfeld trivia game,
your dad's coming.
He's got to come.
Yeah. No, like
sure.
that's not even, I was so stoked that they did a Seinfeld trivia night.
I know.
And I said this in a previous episode as well, because we had to get off the topic of Seinfeld, because we knew that in episode 3 we were going to go into this. While it was the biggest show on television, and while Netflix paid something like, it was like $500 million just to have exclusive streaming rights.
Yeah.
Right? Because prior to that, it was Hulu.
It was on Hulu, and I had watched through it, and I had Hulu with ads. And then the moment it went to Netflix and I could watch it without ads, I was like, this is a game changer, man. It was the best ever. But yeah, you're right. Billions of dollars.
It's just it's so successful. I actually don't meet a lot of people in real life that are huge Seinfeld fans. They're almost like Rush fans, the band Rush.
Okay.
So I don't meet Rush fans in real life, but my brother and I, when we went to see Rush live this one time, it was like people came out of the woods. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Seinfeld fans do exist. They're just living under rocks. They're probably in some server room, like troubleshooting a computer machine, something. But they do exist clearly because there's still stake in it for Netflix to pay that amount of money.
And I think we're going to see like an upswing in Seinfeld fans. I think because this might be a hot take. No, it won't be a hot take. But so The Office was off, like another sitcom that was obviously like a cultural phenomenon.
And that's the one that's always talked about. Now,
when you talk about like the best sitcoms ever, right? And it was a phenomenon when it came out on ABC or NBC, whichever of those, but it had this like grip on us because of Netflix, I think, right? It was on Netflix for like a decade. So people could just keep cycling it and watching it, right? And I think that's one of the reasons it's had such staying power in like the zeitgeist, is because people had access to it until recently to just keep watching it over and over. So I think that same thing is going to happen to Seinfeld. It's just like so easily accessible now that it's on Netflix that we're going to see an upswing in people just being diehard Seinfeld fans.
Oh yeah, and just the just the sheer convenience. I own all of Seinfeld physically.
Yeah.
And I don't even pull the discs out. I just go to Netflix and watch it.
Yep.
And you mentioned The Office. This is another point I really wanted to bring up about Seinfeld, because this is what makes Seinfeld so different.
Yep. I know. Yep.
Every other sitcom, I would say minus Seinfeld and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, typically have these emotional arcs that happen, right? You go into Full House, Family Matters, even shows like Cheers, Taxi, MASH, all of these classic sitcoms, and clearly The Office for modern sitcoms, as far as modern sitcoms go. Seinfeld has absolutely zero heartstrings pulled ever.
There's one scene.
I know, yeah.
Oh, there's one scene, but other than that, you're right. No heart whatsoever.
It doesn't go there. And I think that's why I love it so much. There are times when I want to cry and I watch things that make me cry. Usually like season 8 of The Office. When we get into Jim and Pam's, like when Jim goes to work for Athlete and like all this stuff happens. However, if you want to just laugh and have that one emotion focused on and pushed to its absolute limits, Seinfeld is the show for you. And I think that's, It's Always Sunny is a humongous show. It's been going on forever. FX has had that show going for ages. It's still going.
Yeah.
We've had cast members come and go. Dennis from the show has left and come back. There's something special to that, I think. Yeah. I think it's special when something gets zoned in on, and it's like you don't need to emotionally manipulate anyone. You can just make them laugh for 30 minutes, or in this case, like 22 minutes, and it's over with, right?
Yeah. It's also the ultimate pick up and watch show. Like you can, it's like syndicated on all these networks now.
It's
right?
it's like an anthology series.
Exactly, right? Like you go to Comedy Central and they'll just, if you like turn on Comedy Central, it'll drop you right in the middle. And you don't need to know any context. The episode is a standalone, right? And The Office is like, maybe I'm only saying that because I know The Office so well. I feel like you could drop me anywhere and I could manage, but you still have to ask the questions. Oh, is Andy around yet? Are Pam and Jim dating yet? There are these character questions that you have to ask yourself so you can place yourself in the timeline. But Seinfeld is not that way at all. You could get dropped right in the middle and you don't need to know any context. It's the ultimate pick up and watch show. You
could even get dropped into, if they are telling some sort of plot over the series of a couple episodes, like if we did The Hamptons, for example.
Sure.
The Hamptons is a 2-part episode. If you went into The Hamptons 2, you're fine still.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, Seinfeld is very special in that way. So once again,
okay,
favorite episodes. Let's go for it.
The one that jumps to my brain immediately, and I should have done the research to figure out what the actual name of the episode is. I feel kind of silly for not doing that. It's the episode with Jimmy and the jump shoes. That is my all-time favorite episode. And I think it's become to be my favorite episode because I recently watched it for the first time in a while, and there's a scene where Jimmy slips, right? And he falls down. And
Jimmy's down.
And he goes, Jimmy's down. And I wasn't ready for that. And I had to pause it. I was laughing so hard, right? I was laughing so hard because I forgot that was coming. And I had to pause it. And I went, this laugh alone might make this episode my favorite. This one laugh.
It just broke you.
And it's not even the best part of that episode. It was just the most unexpected at the time, right? You have so much going on in that episode, right? Kramer buys some jump shoes, and then he's got Novocaine, so his mouth is numb. And then he gets into the cab with the guy, and the guy thinks that he's
independent.
He thinks he's an independent
person with developmentally disabled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then his mouth is okay.
When Kramer gets sung to in that episode, dude, it's goodness sakes.
It's also like Jerry says it at the beginning. He says, I don't know, a grown man singing to me? It seems a little effeminate, right? At the end of the episode, they obviously bring everything full circle, which is another reason Seinfeld is so genius. Everything is always wrapped up at the very end, right?
Well, because Jerry Seinfeld he's a stand-up comedian, and that's what stand-up comedy is. It's starting your show with this big hook, and then if you can tie it in at the very end, you're riding high.
Totally.
It's hilarious.
So it ends with this serenade to Kramer,
and
right?
He's melting over it. And that's one of those, like, we've talked about like pieces of good filmmaking, and I know this is a television show, but when the audience is in on something that the characters are not, right? Like, we as an audience know that Kramer is not developmentally disabled, but nobody else does. And then we also know why he's being sung to that way, but Kramer does not. Kramer doesn't get why he's the guest of honor. And it's so funny. It's that like perfect piece of the audience knows something that nobody else does. Yeah.
And it's like a treat. It's such a treat.
And Kramer just thinks that he's being celebrated because he's great.
Yeah.
Because he has his own place and he's independent, and he's like, you know what, I'm getting celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then you have Jimmy, hitting on Elaine, and Elaine doesn't know that she's being hit on. What does
she thinks she's being set up?
Yeah, Jimmy is pretty sweet on Elaine. That's the best ever. Here's another part about that episode that I think about sometimes, right? They give us a little bit of a non-answer in this episode, right? Because you meet Jimmy. Jimmy obviously talks in the third person, right? And you go through this whole thing thinking Jimmy's just a little bit eccentric. But then you go to a banquet for people with developmental needs. And sometimes I think to myself, I was like, is Jimmy also is Jimmy who everybody thinks Kramer is? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is Jimmy the developmentally disabled guy who's independent?
They never say.
They never say.
No.
Or is he just one of the eccentric Seinfeld characters?
We know that he was at the banquet.
Yeah.
But we don't know if that's why. He might just be attending the banquet.
Exactly. Which makes me love Jimmy. And it makes him one of my favorite characters so much. Because he could go either way, right? If he's just an eccentric Seinfeld character,
he's already amazing.
But if he is what everyone thinks Kramer is, he's a hero. He's the best, He's
the one that should be getting serenaded.
Exactly. He's the one selling jump shoes and independent, and he's rocks at basketball.
And he's super positive.
And he's so positive.
But Jimmy holds a grudge. Jimmy never forgets.
Yeah. And obviously, from that episode, we get the iconic George is getting upset. It's the best, dude. That's totally my favorite one. Speaking of, we said at the beginning, we've gotten each other Seinfeld-related gifts. I got you for Christmas one year a shirt that says George is getting upset.
It's amazing.
And I loved it so much I had to get one for myself.
Well,
too.
not only that, you got me so you got me a George t-shirt. You got me a George Pop figurine. It's when George is purple and he has the pyramid around his head.
Yeah, the Funko Pop.
Yeah. And then you got me a certificate for the People Foundation.
Yeah, it says a donation has been made in your name to the People Fund.
The People Fund, yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
No, the Human Foundation.
The Human Foundation.
Money for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I kind of spilled the beans on this episode 2, the very last episode, I think. I think my all-time favorite episode is the Junior Mint episode. And it is so funny. It is so funny. So, the whole episode is based around the fact that Jerry and Kramer watch a surgery, and Kramer is eating Junior Mints like he's at a movie theater watching a film, and one of them topples over the edge and goes into the incision point, and it causes these health complications, and they don't know what's happening. But Jerry is riddled with guilt over this, and it's just so funny. It's so funny. And there are 2 scenes in particular that I adore in this episode. Obviously, it's the one where Jerry wants to tell that they are responsible for this Junior Mint, fiasco. So he's like, "We're like Leopold and Loeb," and then Kramer goes, "You're not gonna tell anyone, you understand me?" And Jerry goes, "I'm telling." And then Kramer goes, "No, you're not.
No, you're not."
Secondly, oh my goodness, Alec, this has to be one of the funniest lines in Seinfeld history. So George comes in, and this is prior to Kramer coming in, and George and Jerry are talking about the Junior Mint, and George cannot fathom how this happened. He goes, "It fell in the hole?" And then Jerry goes, "Yes, the hole." And then George goes, "Did they not notice it?" "No. How could they not notice it?" "Because it's a little mint. It's a Junior Mint."
Which is also one of those moments where I'm like, Jerry was cracking. The actor Jerry was cracking.
Yeah,
he
I remember
could not
you
keep that together.
When we watched that episode together, I remember you. So, fun fact for the learners that want to learn a little something about Alec. Alec creates these like scenarios in his head when he's watching something. He's like, "I bet this person was doing this," or "I bet that person was doing that," with zero confirmation. And I remember watching that episode with you, and you said, "Man, I bet Jerry was riding a fine line between messing that part up."
Yeah.
Because he was so close. Jerry sticks his index finger up like he's making a point. "It's a Junior Mint." And
he's got a smirk on his face when he says it, too.
Yes, it's
yeah.
It's funny you say that. It's like he is riding that fine line, like you said before, when we were.
It's one of those, I can't tell if "it's a Junior Mint" is the best delivery of all time or the worst delivery of all time. It's like, right? It's obviously the best because it's so funny. But like Jerry as an actor, I like you said, I've created this mental image of him almost cracking on
It's like when you're watching Seinfeld with Alec, or anything for that matter, it's like getting a director's commentary when like I'd probably say like 95% of it is not true.
I create director's commentary that's just me making things up.
It's the best. Yeah, and we went and saw Guardians 3 recently, and I think you were eating Junior Mints. Were you not?
I only eat Junior Mints in the theater. Like, Junior Mints are already a theater staple, but since falling in love with that episode, I can't not eat them at the theater. I just have to.
Absolutely. And so Junior Mint, you talked about the Jimmy episode, and Jimmy is also a character that has come in a couple of times. Doesn't he come in a second time?
I don't think he's ever in it again.
Okay. I thought Jimmy came back into the series one other time for some reason. Either way, okay. So we have that episode. We have the Junior Mint episode. I also mentioned the Hamptons, which is hilarious.
Now the Hamptons, that's with when Kramer gets the basket of lobster, right?
Yeah, the poached lobster.
Okay.
Yeah, and the dad of the ugly baby.
That's another.
His dad was a fisherman, and there's this whole thing, and it's not kosher. It's just It's hilarious.
That's another thing about Seinfeld. If you name an episode, you can go, "Oh, is that the one where Kramer fill in the blank?" And you go, "Yes." but it's also the one where George fill in the blank. There's
always like four subplots.
There's always
happening.
like four subplots happening.
Yeah. It's very similar to The Simpsons in that way. The Simpsons was written very similarly. What else? I mentioned Uncle Enzo earlier.
Let's revisit Uncle Enzo.
Okay.
Because I think that's up there too. For a single line, right? And I think you know what the line is. So for context, anybody who doesn't know, like Dylan said, Uncle Enzo is Jerry's barber, and he's been giving him terrible haircuts for years. Kramer says, you need to try his nephew, which I'm spacing his name. Do you remember what the nephew's name is?
It'll come to me.
Okay. So he says, go try him instead. He's way better. So in order to not hurt Uncle Enzo's feelings, Jerry is now getting a haircut behind his back, right? And while this is happening, Gino, he says, you need to go to Gino. Gino brings up Edward Scissorhands. He says, have you seen the Edward Scissorhands? He's like, a man with a scissor hand. I would love to have a scissor hand, right? And Uncle Enzo can't stand it. He's like, scissor hands?
He's like, that's preposterous.
He's like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
He's like, where the man that scissors on his hands?
So Jerry, the only way he can get his haircut is he goes to Gino's apartment, and he's going to get like an apartment haircut from Gino. Just as he takes the first snip of hair, a knock on the door. It's Uncle Enzo.
And Jerry has to get out of there.
Jerry has to hide in the closet, get out on like the fire escape. He has to hide. Enzo comes in and he says, I just want to apologize. I watched the Edward Scissorhands. That Johnny Depp, he making me cry.
And we quote that line a lot too.
Dude.
That Johnny Depp, he making me cry.
That's one of the funniest lines in all of Seinfeld.
It's one of the best episodes too.
So funny.
So funny. Yeah, that's a great one. Another one that I really love too is the parking lot episode.
Yeah, classic.
Dude, parking lot episode is great. That whole season is great. I forget which season the parking lot episode is in, but you also have the Hamptons and the mango. Oh my gosh, the mango is such a funny episode. It's the one where it's basically the Elaine faked it episode.
Okay.
And Jerry just completely spirals, and then George spirals. And then the
Speaking
mango.
of, and we're just going to keep saying this, reasons that Seinfeld is so great, right? The writing is so airtight, right?
Yeah.
Because we have an episode about Elaine faking it. They never say the word orgasm. They never say that word in the entire episode.
But everyone knows.
Everyone knows.
Everyone
right?
knows.
Same with the contest to see who can last the longest, right? They never say the word, but everybody knows. That's just like airtight writing, which is crazy.
when Kramer comes in, slams his money on the table and goes, I'm out.
I'm out.
Everyone knows what that means, right?
Yep.
Because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's people saying things that we all think about but never say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
We all like
people that are uninhibited to social constructs, and they can say what they need to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you know, like the faking it thing, right? I'm sure every woman listening to this podcast knows exactly what that term means, but they never say it because we're always putting forth this effort to walk on eggshells when it comes to each other's feelings and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But every woman out there knows what faking it is. But then Seinfeld pushes the bar even further, and then Kramer goes, I faked it.
There's been two things we've said so far has reminded me of Parks and Rec, which is another one of those shows that I really love. Maybe we'll talk about in a second. I got to tell you a couple Parks and Rec references. Any other episodes that come to mind? So the parking lot episode, and then like the limo episode where George and Jerry get into the limo with the neo-Nazis. And then the airport.
Oh, I thought you were referring to Yuri Testikov, the Russian writer. Another great side character.
Another great one. But there are certain episodes that are, I think they're probably called bottle episodes, where they happen in a single place. And Seinfeld has 4 or 5 of those that are top tier, right? The whole episode happens in one location.
It's like the Fly episode in Breaking Bad. Yep. It's very isolated.
Yep.
And fun. What's funny about that is like that's some people's favorite episode.
I know.
And I think it might be the same for some people with Seinfeld.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yuri Testikov.
The Russian writer.
Is that war? What is it good for?
Yeah, you go.
Okay.
Jerry convinces Elaine that it's Tolstoy.
Yeah.
He convinces Elaine that Tolstoy's original book War and Peace was going to be called War. What is it good for? That his he had like a side chick.
Yeah.
And she was convinced him to name it War. What is it good for? Or War and Peace.
Yeah.
And she brings it up to this Russian writer, and it is just so offensive to
He
him.
hates it. I can't move on talking about isolated episodes without talking about the Chinese restaurant episode.
One of the most iconic episodes in Seinfeld's history.
So iconic. Didn't they pitch that to NBC?
It was in season 1. Was it not?
It was season 1 or 2. It was really early.
Yeah.
Super early. Yeah. Iconic episode.
I actually think that I saw an interview with Larry David where he said that the entire show's like the show's conception was based around bringing up an example of a Chinese restaurant. I think that the Chinese restaurant, not only was that the pitch, that was also like a jumping off point for their concept too.
Interesting.
If I'm not mistaken.
Interesting. Yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool. By the way, anybody who hasn't watched Curb Your Enthusiasm, you don't have to watch the entire thing, but give yourself a good season and a half or 2 seasons, and you'll really start to understand Seinfeld on a deeper level. Because I think it's so interesting, right? Jerry Seinfeld brought the stand-up portion to it, right? And Larry David might be one of the best sitcom writers, producers of all time.
I would say he is.
And that marriage together was like golden. It's golden, right? Now, with Curb Your Enthusiasm, it obviously is on HBO. It's a little bit more vulgar. So it depends on what your sensibilities are. But if you're a Seinfeld fan, you owe it to yourself to do 10, 15 episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
It's George Costanza.
It's the George Costanza show.
Yeah.
And we're talking about people not being inhibited to say what they're really thinking. That's the ultimate through line of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David says exactly what comes to his mind, no matter how socially unacceptable it is.
So we could talk about episodes forever, right? However, I think it's equally important for us to at least get to this. And then I also want to know what are some of the other sitcoms that you're super into. But getting into this first, we have to talk about Jason Alexander and Michael Richards. Now, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but Michael Richards got into some hot water and ultimately has been canceled by Hollywood. However, I think anyone that watched Michael Richards, whether it be on Seinfeld or anything else, he was in Airheads, that movie with Adam Sandler, hilarious.
He was in UHF with Weird Al Yankovic.
I always forget about that movie.
That movie is so funny.
The Michael Richards has to be one of the most gifted physical comedy actors, period,
of all time.
And you know, physical comedy, it took a break, right? You obviously had slapstick humor. You had Three Stooges and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a long period where it wasn't funny to fall down. But then you watch Michael Richards and he puts his body on the line. He's not just physically funny. He's also his line delivery. It's very clear that him and Jason Alexander are the best, most like tight actors on that entire show.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, they're both like Juilliard trained.
I know that. Yeah, I do know that Jason Alexander, he's done all sorts of things. He's done like lots of theater and things like that. And you know, we talk a lot about Dumb and Dumber, which we'll talk about in a later episode. Some of those theatrical actors that do these like dramatic plays and things like that, they turn out to be the funniest. With Dumb and Dumber, we see Jeff Daniels with Jim Carrey, and he keeps up with him the whole movie.
It's because, so I've watched an interview about this, like why are they so good, right? And it actually came from an interview with Bill Hader on Superbad, right? And I won't get into the details of it, but at some point, the director came to Bill Hader and said, "Hey, you're playing this for comedy. I need you to play it for real, right? Don't play it for comedy. Play it as if you're actually the character, right?" And so I think that's why dramatic actors like who we've mentioned are so good in comedy, because they're not playing it for the laugh. They're not hamming it up for the laugh. They're playing it to the character, and the character is what's funny. And that's why it comes through so good, especially with George. He's never playing it to comedy. he's playing George.
Yeah, he's such. I'm speechless when it comes to Jason Alexander as George Costanza, and George Costanza, and there's obviously like Jerry Stiller is another
top level.
Like, if we're gonna talk about the best side characters of Seinfeld, Frank Costanza is the top. There is absolutely no question that no one on that show outside of the core cast
is funnier
than Frank Costanza.
The funniest.
And there's what I really love about,
he was funny in everything he ever did, right?
Well, yeah, and we're gonna get into King of Queens in a second.
He's
sure,
the
right?
best. Yeah.
But Jerry Stiller was a Great Depression comedian. He was very big on, because laughter really elevated people's their morale during the Great Depression. So he's very dialed into comedy in like such a deep way. And he would
like perform for the troops and stuff to like
amazing,
bring them up. Yeah,
amazing. So, but George Costanza, Jason Alexander, so funny. He literally plays to all of the things that we want to say but we don't say. It's like incredible. Michael Richards, Jason Alexander, and Dreyfus are all top tier. Without them, that show would be garbage. If you had a show just about Jerry, because in my opinion, and this is even going into his stand-up, this might be a hot take for some people, I don't think Jerry Seinfeld's that funny. And I know they make his character's comedy not that great on the show as well. And, 90s is a different time. Where our comedic sensibilities are very elevated.
Yeah.
We're a lot more sophisticated now in terms of comedy. But I don't know. It's literally the perfect cast.
The perfect cast. Yeah, you're right. I'm a little upset at myself having this. It took us this long to talk about Frank Costanza.
Well, and I knew that you're a really big fan of Frank Costanza, so I wanted to get to that as well because, oh my gosh, yeah. And you and I sat and watched so many bloopers from Seinfeld, and our favorites are the ones of Jerry Stiller, because
those had to have been the hardest scenes to film. Because he's so dialed in.
Especially for Elaine.
Oh my God. I think him and Elaine, him and Julia Louis-Dreyfus had what I like to refer to as a giggle connection. And it's something I had with my mom, and now I have with my little sister, that we can just look at each other and the giggles just start going, right? I don't know if it's like the sensibilities of our sense of humor, but so not to get too cheesy, but watching bloopers of like Frank Costanza and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I guess I should say Jerry Stiller and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, almost makes me feel a little like it makes me feel in my heart, because I can see there's like this relationship with them that reminds me of, at least the humor side of it, that reminds me of the relationship I have with my mom. And it's really, really special. I know we're adding heart to a Seinfeld episode now.
Somebody has to. Yeah, and what I really love is that I think Seinfeld has aided you and I in a friendship as well, because you and I don't have a lot in common.
At least, yeah, as far as our like backgrounds and our life experience, it's pretty stinking different.
We're very different. Like, I'm sorry to bring this up on the show, but I bring up Alek a lot to my friends. And I talk about some of our differences, and it blows people away that you can be friends with someone so different.
Yeah.
But what's beautiful is that with a show like Seinfeld, it's like a bridge.
Totally.
And then we start like finding out all the other things we have in common. It's like, I don't know. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. It's helped me bond with my brother. It's helped me bond with you. I've gotten my roommate Caleb into Seinfeld. It's done its job in such a brilliant way. And I also talked a little bit earlier. I've mentioned Taxi, Cheers, MASH. My favorite sitcom of all time is Seinfeld. However, a close second is Taxi. And it's because I'm such a big Danny DeVito fan. Not only that, Judd Hirsch, Tony Danza, like it goes on, right? We had Andy Kaufman, who was a comedic genius. Taxi was great. Cheers is also, like I adore Cheers so much. It's so funny.
Now, forgive my ignorance. Is Cheers an offshoot of Taxi? No. It's Frasier is an offshoot of Cheers.
Yes, because Dr.
my bad.
Frasier Crane is a character on Cheers, which Frasier's also
Frasier's funny.
super funny.
Yeah.
Super funny. But I love, here's the thing. A lot of sitcoms, for some reason, take place in NYC.
Yeah.
You have Seinfeld, you have Friends, Taxi takes place in New York City. Cheers is in Boston.
Yeah.
And I love that because, Sam Malone, the owner of the bar Cheers, is an ex-Red Sox player. Mm-hmm. And then you have the coach who used to coach baseball. And then there's all these other characters, right?
Yeah.
Danny DeVito's wife plays Carla in it. And it's just, it's so funny.
I wonder if, I've never thought about this. I bet you most of these shows are based in New York City because it lends itself to believable side characters, right? Like, I've never been to New York City, but everything I see about it on, social media is that it breeds these characters, right? The wildest people will just show up in New York City. And I feel like maybe with Seinfeld and with Friends, it's more believable that some of these goofy side characters will show up if it's based in NYC.
I would say so, just because, being a Californian myself, Californians have edge, but Californians don't have time.
Okay.
what I mean by that is if you go to California, you'll notice that the lifestyle is very fast paced, but people don't talk much. They won't talk to you. We live in Idaho, and in Idaho, you and I will sit and just talk for hours, much like we're doing now. People on the East Coast have edge, but they also talk.
Yeah.
So,
it's culturally ingrained in them, especially with like the Italian and the Irish, all those different culturals.
They're all East Coast.
Yep.
Right? You even go down to Florida. Cubans are very cultural as well. It's beautiful. Uh-huh. Californians have edge, but Californians don't have time to talk to you. Whereas people on the East Coast also have edge, but they will talk to you.
Yeah.
Right. So you have some of the best characters coming out of the East Coast, but those are my favorites. I love MASH as well. MASH is a show that, I don't know. Sometimes it took that emotional heart pull to such a dark, disturbing place that it's very strange. And I love MASH. Sanford and Son is great. I just love those early sitcoms. But some of the modern ones are great too. You and I are big Office fans. It's Always Sunny, I feel, has sort of lost its way just a little bit, but it's been pretty consistent. I want to know, what are some of the other sitcoms that mean a lot to you?
Well, The Office is up there. Parks and Rec is one of those. It came out at the same time. So there was an era, I think it was NBC. Don't hate me if I get it wrong, where there was like NBC had like 3 hours of just heavy hitters on every Thursday night or something, right? You'd watch 30 Rock, and then The Office, and then Parks and Rec, and then Community would follow the end of it.
Bangers.
So good. 30 Rock I was never super into, but The Office, Parks and Rec, and Community I got into in a major way, right? And speaking, like, I'll drop my couple of Parks and Rec references that I've thought of. There's an episode where Ron Swanson gets back together with Tammy, his ex-wife, and then they have this night of just like lust and mayhem that follows because they're these two sticks of dynamite. And then Ron comes to his senses and he's like, it's time to leave. And Tammy goes, just so you know, I faked it. And then Ron Swanson goes, so did I. And then there's another episode, speaking of Enzo in the barbershop, where Leslie Knope is getting ready for this conference. And so she goes into this old school barbershop, right? And this guy's claim to fame is that he's cut the Kennedy's hair. It's like the dude in Pawnee who has cut a Kennedy's hair. And so she goes in and she says, I just need something that makes me look like a senator, right? And the next thing you know, she shows up to this conference and she has this very masculine haircut and she's in a pantsuit. And then Anne is her friend that she's going with. and the entire conference believes that they're a lesbian couple, and it like just spirals out of control. Two great moments. Anyway, Community, I think, edges out Parks and Rec. That one's at the very top of mine. I think it's one of like, we're talking about Seinfeld with its 4 core cast. Community has one of like the most solid ensemble casts, I think, in most sitcoms. It's so, I guess I shouldn't say that. Every good sitcom has a solid ensemble. Love that one. Chevy Chase is brilliant in that, despite all of his stuff that he's gotten into with being kind of a jerk. There are 2 more that really speak to me, and I don't even watch them that much anymore, but they just have kind of this special place, right? When I was in high school, I would come home from school, and right as I got home, our living room at the time had like this window, right? You had like the TV, the couches, and then there was a wall, but the wall had this like peeking window that would peek into the kitchen, right? Am I describing that okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I would come home, coming through the front door or the garage, and I would see my mom sitting in the kitchen, looking through that window, and 2 shows had just come on, right? There was 2 episodes of Reba, and then 2 episodes of King of Queens.
I'm a survivor.
And I don't even think that my mom liked the show Reba that much, but my mom is from Texas, born and raised. And so my mom would always seek out these little chances to reconnect with her southernness, right? So watching Reba was just her being able to hear the accent for half an hour or an hour, because there was 2 episodes, right? And she loved that so much. So she would watch Reba, just be in love with hearing her accent in media. And then the King of Queens would come on right after that, and there'd be 2 episodes. And 5 days, 5 weekdays.
Another sitcom in New York.
Yeah, Queens, totally. Yeah. So I would say 4 out of 5 days of the week, I would plop on the couch and me and my mom would just like laugh at Reba and then the King of Queens. And Kevin James has made a lot of goofy movies, especially on the Adam Sandler bill, but the King of Queens is so good. Jerry Stiller in that is top tier comedy because he's not a side character anymore. He's like one of the main ensemble. So he gets way more screen time. And it's like it's Frank Costanza dialed down just a little bit, right? He's not quite as angry, but he's easily as abrasive and goofy.
And both characters live in Queens.
Yeah.
Frank Costanza lives in Queens also.
And in King of Queens, it's Carrie doesn't want her dad to live in a retirement home, so they let him live in the basement. So he just like wanders up and then runs amok in their life and then goes back downstairs. And it's the best. So yeah, those, and unfortunately the King of Queens isn't on Netflix or any of the streamers. I need to go to a pawn shop or a thrift store and find the seasons and just have it.
You could go to Walmart. I think the whole series is going for like $30.
I need to go do that for sure.
For
I
sure.
probably will.
Yeah.
Because I need to dive back into that series, at least just for more Jerry Stiller.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah, there's like 6 or 7 seasons.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
And obviously, we would, we're kind of getting to the end of the podcast here, but there are 2 other things, because we can't get away without talking about Friends.
Okay.
Right? Friends is one of the most iconic sitcoms of all time. I've never told you this. You actually bred something into my head and low key changed my perception of Friends forever.
In a bad way?
I wouldn't say in a bad way, because I could still enjoy Friends. Friends is awesome, okay? And I usually am on the opposite side of everyone else, where I'm a huge Ross fan. Everyone hates Ross. I think Ross is one of the funniest characters on that show. For me, it's Ross, Chandler, and Phoebe. I love all 3 of them.
Really?
Yes.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, because when people talk about it, they always talk about Joey.
Joey is the one that I love the most.
Yeah, and Joey's funny, right? But I think Joey's at his funniest when he's with Chandler.
Okay, yeah, they're a great duo for sure.
Yes, but Ross is hilarious, bro. And everyone is annoyed by Ross. People think Ross is this just irritating, insufferable character.
I understand why people think he's funny. in my brain, I can't separate his humor
he
from how terrible of a person he is and how whiny and
well,
like
that's the
self-conceited.
complaint,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But also, you and I were in Florida, and we were watching a Friends marathon. We eventually switched over to SpongeBob.
Yeah.
But
talking about sitcoms, does that count?
no,
Okay.
no. What is sitcom short for? Like situational comedy?
Probably.
So probably, it might constitute. I think in like the world of Hollywood, probably not. Friends is also, it's one of the most iconic shows ever, period.
Yeah.
You and I and our friend Alex had a discussion in our hotel room when we were watching Friends about how terrible all of them are.
Yeah.
They are really bad people.
Yeah.
They're gaslighting, they're manipulating, they're lying to each other.
Which, to be fair, in a sitcom, that's almost like a necessary evil to create the situational comedy, right? If you watch most sitcoms, the majority of the characters are kind of conniving against each other, and that's what creates the situations.
I would not have a problem with this, but Friends sets it up as if they're all these heartfelt, deep connected friends. Now, Seinfeld, awful people.
Yeah.
And that's going to be our closing topic is the finale, okay? Because we're going to come back around to that. Seinfeld, It's Always Sunny. We can kind of get away with some of the more offensive humor of It's Always Sunny because It's Always Sunny's characters always lose.
Yeah, they're always the bad guys.
The reason It's Always Sunny has not been canceled, I think, is because they get theirs in the end. Seinfeld, they get theirs in the end as well. So no matter how horrible they are, they get theirs in the end. Friends is set up to be this show about these characters that are really close. You know, Ross and Monica are brother and sister. They're all like, they're really close friends, but they're to one another. And, I'm still a huge Friends fan, but like after, it wasn't just you. I've had other people say that in my life as well. I've just been connecting on it. It's sort of like that 70s show where when someone points out the fact that every single episode is just Donna and Eric having an argument, you can't help but focus on that.
Yeah.
You know? Because that 70s show is so iconic. But when you notice every episode is structured around Eric doing something stupid, Donna getting mad, and then them ending up maybe on the water tower at the end, having a little heartfelt discussion, or on the hood of the car.
Yeah.
Every episode is structured that way.
There are a lot of sitcoms like this, right?
And that's why sitcoms get a bad rap, I think.
I think you're right, yeah. Because, trigger warning to anybody. The Big Bang Theory is awful.
I don't like it either.
The Big Bang Theory is also one of those iconic sitcoms that I think isn't very good, right? Yeah. And here's the thing. When it first came out and I first watched it, I thought it was really, really funny. I was also like 15, right? And I thought it was funny because I had never seen nerds depicted before. So that was funny to me. But as I got older, I was like, this isn't funny, right? Sheldon Cooper is the worst character ever. There's no way he would ever have any friends because all he does is demean people. All he does is talk down to people. And then at the end of the episode, they're still okay with it. And I think that's what Ross is. Ross is the blueprint for treating my friends terribly an entire episode. And then we all kiss and make up at the end.
Yeah. With Sheldon Cooper, it's almost like, him and Leonard are friends because Leonard, there are those people in your life, I think, that you sort of accept. Maybe not everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, Leonard is connected to Howard and what's the other one's name? Raj.
Yep.
And then of course Penny. But like it's all surrounded around Leonard. Leonard is the main character of that show.
Yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm.
But I think what most people liked about the Big Bang Theory is that throughout the show, Sheldon has these moments where his humanity comes through because he's very much an academic. Yeah. And let me be clear about this, okay? I do not like academics. I don't. I don't. When you are talking to someone and they're always very matter of fact and they're always very logical. Yeah, and it's always actually They want to correct you. Like, dude, I got into this, I won't name this person, but I got into an argument with an academic one time at a party like 10 years ago or something. And he was trying to tell me that it was impossible for someone that smokes marijuana to have a psychosis episode. And I was telling him what the definition of psychosis was and that it is possible. You can have a psychosis episode without the influence of a substance, but he was very much one of those actually people. And I'm just like, I can't stand this. So when I watch Big Bang Theory, I get so irritated by the whole like, we're smarter than you and we know it kind of thing, but the humor isn't very smart. It's like it's dumb. It's dumb humor provided by smart characters.
The same joke over and over is like Sheldon calling people out for saying something that isn't correct. That's the entire show. Anyway,
sorry, I'm very much with you. If you like the Big Bang Theory out there, just know that these are opinions, and if something makes you happy, it's cool. I'm not a fan of the show.
The whole point of this show is that we like stuff and want to talk about it. So we're never going to be doofing on people who like things. You know what I mean? Like if you like something, like it. That's the whole point of this show, is that we like things. So keep liking what you like.
Yeah. Yeah, we were rocking baby metal on the way here, and I love those Japanese girls singing about like foxes and karate and shit. So I like that stuff.
It's all good. It's all on the table.
So let's wrap this up. What I want the closing opinion to be here. We need to talk about Seinfeld's finale. Seinfeld's finale is very controversial because the show had been running for so long. The show had such a fan base. It was the biggest show on TV, and
season 9 was also
it was their highest numbers.
Well, they were also putting out bangers.
Yes.
You go back and watch those episodes, you're like, dang, they were kind of at the top of their game.
They were. It like the Seinfeld finale. For those that don't know, sorry, I'm spoiling it. If you want to turn this off, that's fine. It comes down to this clips episode where everyone sort of in the history of Seinfeld comes to testify
as character witnesses
because the pilot gets accepted. They're going on one last hoorah together on this plane. The plane has to land, I believe, for repairs, and they witness a man getting mugged and they make fun of him. And there's this law called the Good Samaritan law, which is actually real in some states in the United States, where if you are witnessing a crime and it's not going to put you in immediate danger to help assist in said crime, you are morally obligated to do so. So they get arrested because they stand there laughing at someone getting mugged because they're from New York. And all of these, like you said, character witnesses come and testify against them. And the end of the show is they go to prison.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
Now, this is a very controversial move because to some people it felt very jarring. And on top of that, it's sort of like, I think when any show ends, like we go back to Friends or any other sitcom, it ends with a feeling good thing. I'm very much on the side of, I think the Seinfeld ending is very appropriate and it makes total sense, but I want to know what you think about this. What is your take on the Seinfeld finale, and how do your opinions differ from some of the other Seinfeld fans out there, you think?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, the final two, is it a two-parter, maybe even a three-parter?
It's a two-parter, I believe, yeah.
It's a clips episode embedded in a story, right? Now, when I get to the 100th episode on Netflix, I skip it, right? Because it's just clips, and it's just clips, right? And the reason I like the finale, and I think the finale is actually very well suited and maybe even one of the best finales to a show like this, is that they find a way to feed us clips embedded in this story of they're going to jail if these people testify against them, right? So I think that that's a really clever way to give us clips without just feeding us clips, right? I think that's a really clever way. And then, as you said, the defense does not win. The prosecutors are able to prove that these are terrible people, and for that reason, they go to jail, right? And not only do they go to jail, all four of them walk into the same cell, which is so silly and so ridiculous that they would go into the same cell.
And it goes back to,
they start talking about buttons, which was the very
first episode,
the very
ever.
first thing that Jerry and George talked about.
And that's
in the
such a
first
beautiful thing, isn't it?
And I think it's the ultimate send off to these characters, and actually a really appropriate one, because the way that Seinfeld is built to be, as you mentioned, almost like an anthology, every episode is a standalone story. It essentially could go on forever, right? And it's not like The Office or Parks and Rec, where we need to tie a bow on all of these characters and like give them a final send off and, you know, conclude their arc. The characters in Seinfeld have no arc. They're not going to change.
None of them had any growth.
And they also didn't learn from being sent to jail. They didn't learn anything.
Jerry and George were on their way to growing, with the pilot potentially going somewhere. However, that just gets destroyed.
So putting all four of them in the same jail cell and then watching them bicker as it fades out, right? We as an audience go, oh, they're just going to keep being the same. And there's no change. They're going to be in their jail sentence, and then they're going to leave, and then they're going to go back to being the exact same, right? We almost have closure, and then that there is no closure. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's just going to be more of the same, right? And that's the bow that's tied on these characters. They didn't learn anything. They didn't grow. They're just going to be the same and in scene. You know what I mean?
There's sort of a discomfort for viewers when they watch something that goes against the grain of what they are conditioned to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch The Office ending, it's stunning.
Yep.
Right? Because The Office has already put us in a world where we have emotional attachment to these characters. They have arcs, right? Michael Scott ends up with Holly. He leaves the show. Jim and Pam end up together. There's all these arcs. You know, Andy Bernard ends up becoming the boss and then has this, like, he falls off and becomes a bad boss, but then he comes back and makes it right. There's all these things that happen where when they come together at the very end and it's the final goodbye, you really, that final season of is it 8?
Yeah.
Season 8 rips my heart out of my chest every single time. Yeah. It's so beautiful.
And not just the finale, because the whole
all of it
season.
All of it. And, you know, we get into Seinfeld. Seinfeld has already defied expectations by having a show that does not have emotional attachment. However, it would have been more jarring if they had sent it off in a beautiful way.
It's what everybody would have wanted, but it wouldn't have been in character with the rest of the show.
I think it's what everyone thinks they would have wanted.
I think you're right.
So a lot of people would think, you know, I don't feel like this show had an appropriate send-off. But if you inject what most people believe an appropriate send-off to be, the reality of it is it doesn't fit the context of the show.
Yeah.
The show's ending was literally the best they could have done with that. It's either that or the plane crashes and they all die.
Especially because it wasn't like ratings were bad or that the writers were running out of ideas. It was Jerry Seinfeld went, 9 is good.
I also think the finale had the highest ratings of any episodes throughout the series. Everyone tuned in to watch Seinfeld end, and everyone was upset.
They were mad, dude.
Because they went against the grain. It's the same thing in films, right? Like I was reading a review today from a local filmmaker that we live close to, and someone I respect and admire very much. But this person had talked about Midsummer by Ari Aster. Now, you have not seen Midsummer just yet, but we're gonna probably watch it together soon. Yeah. Midsummer, I won't get into the ending of the movie, but it ends where people that have been conditioned to have closure, it does not provide that closure that people are expected to be fed. Mm-hmm. And this person was saying that's the reason they didn't like the movie, and that totally makes sense. Or they didn't like the ending.
It tainted the whole movie for them?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, they still praised it, but they said the ending bothered them. And I think it's the same thing with Seinfeld, where it did not spoon feed what we are used to eating.
Yeah.
And for that reason, people were uncomfortable and they didn't feel closure. Not having closure is one of the most uncomfortable sensations for human beings, period. So when you get into a show or a movie not providing, like you said, that bow on top, it's going to make a lot of people mad. But when we sit down all this time later and we talk about the ending, it's brilliant.
It's good.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's the most appropriate send-off available, for sure.
Holy cow. We just talked about Seinfeld for like an hour or so.
Really?
And
there's more that could be said.
It could go on forever. And this is probably, I'm not exaggerating, this is probably like the 50th plus long form conversation we've had about the show.
Yep.
It means a lot to us. It'll continue to mean a lot to a lot of people. But again, it's not, I actually want to talk about something you said to me. And I think this is going to really, I think this is going to drive my point home.
Okay.
So Alek and I, during the pandemic, me, Alek and his wife, and I believe Caleb, we went and saw Jackass Forever. And you said something that I'll never forget, and I think it's brilliant. You said to me after we saw the movie, this came at a time where people really needed to laugh. Like, above all else, people really needed to laugh right now. And I think that, for me, is Seinfeld. Like I said earlier, it pushes that button relentlessly, and it doesn't dissect you into multiple emotions. It just makes us laugh. And I love it for that reason. I just love the laughter. I love being able to focus on laughter. And I don't know, the show is brilliant. And what more can we say?
Yeah, I agree, man. Thanks for remembering things I say. That feels good.
I got a good memory. Yeah, so we appreciate you guys listening to the Very Refreshing podcast. We have a lot of other topics to go over, moving forward. But this was just one of them. So any closing statements, Alek? Is there anything you want to throw in? And
no, I mean, yeah, go watch Seinfeld. Like I said, go watch the things that you like, right? I know we talked a little bit of smack about one of them, but if something makes you laugh, sit down and drink it in, because that's one of the best things that you can do. We live in such like a cool time where all of these different kinds of media are available to us, and we have like an endless amount of things that can make us laugh if we just go do a search. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of being able to goof around and then goof around with your buddies over it. I think that's a cool thing.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Again, this is episode 3 of the Very Refreshing podcast. Appreciate you guys listening. This is a brand new podcast. We are just kind of experimenting, testing the waters, seeing what works. I know that most successful podcasts have a very specified topic. You have podcasts that are commonly with comedians nowadays, or I don't know. It just depends, right? But us being all over the place, but still in the realm of pop culture and media, we're just going to have to see how this goes. And hopefully people enjoy it and we can keep doing this. But I'm having fun.
Same. A lot of fun.
Like we recorded a couple episodes a week ago, and I've been thinking about it all week. I'm like, man, I can't wait till next weekend where we get to sit down and do another one of these.
Excited to pump it out, let you guys hear it.
So, all right, that's going to do it, guys. Thank you for listening to the Very Refreshing podcast. Make sure to follow us on your podcast platforms. We're going to be releasing a new episode every week. So next week, same time, same place, we're going to have the episode 4. And yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for sitting down, Alek. Thanks for doing this with me. And
of course.
Thanks for liking Seinfeld.
Yeah, of course. See you guys.
Have bananas on the side!
Thank you for checking out the Very Refreshing podcast. Subscribe for more content just like this.